Good morning. My name is James McCabe, and my company is Zootoxins, and we extract venom from native California reptiles for use in research, anti-venom production, and vaccine work. Today we're doing a workshop at UCLA, and we're going to give people an opportunity to look at every species of venomous snake in California, as well as non-venomous, like the guy I'm holding here. We will basically be going over first aid, field work, and talking about other things that are potential dangers, such as toxic plants that may be encountered. And at the end, we will be giving people an opportunity to actually handle rattlesnakes with the proper equipment and PPE, just to show them that snakes are, especially rattlesnakes, are not confrontational. They really have no desire to be, basically tampered with, or they're not going to chase you, they're not going to go after you. Snakes aren't built for that. They view humans as larger objects that are potentially predators, so they want to get away from you. They have no desire to hang out with you. So that's pretty much what we're going to cover today.
Well, good morning. My name is James McCabe, and I own a company called Zootoxins, and we are the only licensed, permitted company in the state of California to extract venom for sale for research, anti-venom production. We are producing our own product, which is a canine and equine vaccine. There is one on the market currently. It doesn't work. If you look at a 2015 paper in the AVMA, the Veterinarian Journal, and work was actually done here at UCLA. I am the co-author on that one. Basically shows that that vaccine doesn't work against any of our native rattlesnakes. So we have all the native rattlesnakes back there. Every venomous reptile in California is represented back on that table. So when we have time, probably while you're waiting to play with live rattlesnakes, you will have an opportunity to take a look at that. So let's kind of look at what today's agenda is. So we're going to just do a quick review over venomous and poisonous. What do those terms mean? And then we're going to talk about, there is some perceived, notion out there in the general public that rattlesnakes are out of control, they're everywhere. This is shown up in papers in Europe and in England in particular, which they're absolutely fascinated with the fact that you would think you're going to run into rattlesnakes just walking down the street every day. Then we're going to talk about, basically concentrate on the two problematic animals when you're out doing field work. And basically it's going to be Hymenoptera, which are bees and wasps. They kill way more people than rattlesnakes do. And we're going to talk about rattlesnakes. We are going to talk a little bit about safety and first aid, which is actually going to be really brief. And it's, there's not much you're going to do in the field. Your first aid kit is your car keys, a car, a cell phone, and access to an emergency room. Other than that, there's not a whole lot you're going to do. So all this, cutting and sucking and spitting, and don't do that. Okay, that's crazy. We'll talk a little bit about bees and wasps and safety and first aid. Plants. So we're talking about a site. So our presentation today is, if you're in charge of organizing a group, going out, even not even associated with the university, things you should probably consider when you're going out in the middle of nowhere. So we'll talk about the plants, talk about site preparation and considerations, and a pre-planning checklist, okay, of equipment and supplies. So let's start out with venomous and poisonous. You ingest poison, you are injected with venom. So this is how you make that major distinction. There are exceptions to every rule. And there's a snake called the Japanese keelback, which you can do either one, depending on if you bite the snake or the snake bites you. So, all right, so let's talk about rattlesnake population. So these are just two headlines, fairly recent, from 2021. The Guardian, rattlesnakes everywhere. This is one of their headlines, which I thought was hilarious. Consequence of the drought. Some truth to that, and we'll explain why in a minute. And the other one is based off of a study that was conducted in 2015 from Emily Taylor's lab up in San Luis Obispo, where they found, no mystery, rattlesnakes like it a little bit hotter temperature than most other species. And we're only talking 1 to 2 degrees. But when people get their hands on these papers, this is what the general public gets to see. They get to see this craziness. So talking about the last few years, this is a Thomas fire in Ventura County. Very close to where I live, and yeah, it was not fun at 2 in the morning, waking up and seeing that going over the hillside. And that is the fire from space. Did a lot of damage. So how did these fires and how does this drought affect rattlesnakes? Rattlesnakes are well, let's talk about one other weather effect that we had this year. I had to add this slide because now we had 12 atmospheric rivers come over California during this rainy season, which again affects the populations of both plants and animals. So the good thing is I've seen up my canyon amphibians, which I have not seen in 10 years. Come out this year. These things hunker down and they survive. I don't know how, but they do. But we have that effect, which also now we have our super bloom, we have all these beautiful little flowers. So for those of you who know what this is the Carrizo Plain up in San Luis Obispo County. That line running through the center is San Andreas Fault. One of the few places you can really see the fault line right at the surface in very, very clear-cut definition. So that was a year ago. That's this year. So all of a sudden, we have plants, we have flowers, we have all kinds of things. I'm sure the kangaroo rat population is increasing because of this. Along with a lot of the other rodents in the area, which, is beneficial not only to those rodent species, but also to whatever snakes are hanging around. Now, when snakes are exposed to this, and if you all remember the old, lynx and Arctic hare graph from the Hudson Bay Company, which shows that basically when a prey species peaks in population, it takes approximately 1.5 to 2 years before the predators catch up to it. So there's this beautiful graph over 100 years of just pelts that they collected, which shows this up and down, but it always shows this lag in time. So we may not see an overabundance of reptiles as the result of this, but in a few years, who knows, maybe more. Unfortunately, this is all going to dry out in a couple of months, and it's all going to be you know, under fire watch again, so. And the animals that are affected by these massive fires, which people don't really take into account, badgers, skunks, there's a lot of smaller mammals which don't necessarily have the ability to escape these, you know, these major fires that cover just, you know, hundreds and thousands of acres. They can perish. Badgers are kind of interesting to me. They used to be everywhere. I grew up in Santa Barbara and Ventura County. And today, you never see the animals. There's a roadkill kind of count that UC Davis takes every year. You know, people, you can go online, go to UC Davis, if you can report roadkill as you find it. They have not found badgers in the last 3 years in Ventura County on the road. Doesn't mean they're extinct, but it just means they've really been pushed back to the extreme. We have a California king snake eating a rattlesnake up there. Now, rattlesnakes, and we'll talk about this in a minute, are set up uniquely to really survive through fire season as opposed to all the non-venomous snakes. And it comes down to their lifestyle, which we'll cover in a minute. Red-tailed hawk, bobcat. So a lot of these animals aren't only under attack because of fire and drought. Right now, we have a lot of problems in Ventura County with people putting out rat poisoning. Rat poison, rats are then consumed by bobcats. So all of these predators that should be taking care of our rodent problems are being poisoned, which is really sad. Coyotes have learned to adapt to humans, and basically they've shifted from their natural prey to cats and dogs. So at least in my neighborhood, we see them at least once a month, and there's forever this endless list of missing dogs and cats on the telephone pole. And you try to explain to people like you're not going to find your dog and cat. So, but they don't want to hear that. So nature hates a vacuum. So we have this depletion of predators for multiple reasons. And we have, even in drought years, we have some rain, we have some replenishment of plant populations, which means rodents survive just fine and dandy, which this is another reason rattlesnakes are basically increasing in population. There is a good food supply. So let's get familiar with another thing. When you're going out to a site or an area, you should know not only the dangerous stuff, you should know the good animals that you should leave alone. So upper left, California king snake. The middle is a small western racer. A gopher snake, which we have one back here, which you are more than welcome to handle when we get through with this. Southern Pacific on the bottom left. So take a good look at that. If you go to any field guide, this drives me crazy. Everybody uses this classic picture of a jet black Southern Pacific. If you look at the populations, only a small percentage come in at being jet black like that. And that's why we have so much misidentification. People call them different names depending on where they come from. So it's kind of problematic, but that's the one you're going to see in every field guide you ever look at, is this nice black animal. And they're not all like that.
See, that's the rattlesnake.
Yes, Southern Pacific. That's the one, that's the most common rattlesnake you're going to occur in this part of California, right along the coast, all the way down into Baja. So as soon as we hit hardcore desert, that's where their populations drop off. Although someone recently gave me a Southern Pacific that was caught on a rock pile in the middle of the desert, out by 29 Palms. So you know, Never say never.
Yeah,
But,
I saw one that color too.
what's that?
I saw one that color too.
Where?
Spencer Falls, Seco,
Okay,
was
yeah,
taking apart a long jail.
yeah. So there's another king snake eating rattlesnake and just a big coach whip, another racer. We have this one, which is even more uncommon. We do not have coral snakes in California. If you see a red, black, yellow, or white banded snake, it is non-venomous. It is a king snake, okay? Then we have this guy, which again, with kind of climate change, global warming, whatever terminology you want to use, we have found yellow belly sea snakes being swept up from basically equatorial waters up as far north as Ventura County, Oxnard, in that region on the beach. So it's been a couple of years, but at one point in time, two of them came up within a week. So lifestyle matters. So this is why rattlesnakes are doing so well. First of all, they're kind of an ambush predator. So they're just sitting there waiting for prey. So all these other snakes, king snakes, gopher snakes, they are large diurnal snakes which are out there tracking food down, which means they're crossing roads more frequently, they're getting hit by cars. Gardeners are finding them in the middle of the day as opposed to rattlesnakes, which are kind of hunkering down. So that's their first benefit. The other thing is, how many calories does it take to survive this lifestyle? So there was several studies. One of the more recent ones said that an adult male rattlesnake can survive an entire year on 500 calories. So 500 calories. So that's half a Chipotle burrito. Okay? There's not many animals in the world that can survive an entire season on 500 calories. But even a lot of the larger rattlesnakes that we obtain, that are 4 to 5 feet in length, they will only eat 1 or 2 ground squirrels a year. It doesn't matter how often I offer them food, they're just not going to take it. They are built to eat that way. They're ovoviviparous, which means they give this live birth. Now, king snakes, gopher snakes, all these racers, they're all egg layers. So if you're going to lay your eggs, depending on if it's really deep in the ground somewhere in a den, of some mammal or wherever you can hide them, if there's a surface fire, you're going to lose a large percentage of the offspring and the eggs that were produced that year. Rattlesnakes, on the other hand, because we're carrying our offspring in our body, they're able to get out, go underground, go deep into burrows of ground squirrels or whatever species is locally in the area. Because they're carrying their offspring, as soon as that fire clears the area, they're going to have a normal reproductive year. They're going to be able to give birth to those offspring. And even though the overall climate in the area may not be optimal for their survival, they're born late enough in the year that most of them can overwinter until spring to get food. They can collect rainwater. So I don't know if there's any herpetologists out there, but if you go road riding, you have your headlights out there and you wait for something to just light up on the asphalt. And generally, those are all the non-venomous snakes. They light up. These guys don't, because of the way they have these little tiny micro grooves on their scales which don't reflect light properly. So rattlesnakes are a little more difficult to see on the road than other snakes. But those micro grooves also allow them to basically coil their body in a position where if there's any fog or any moisture at all coming through the region, it will collect on those scales. There's a great video online Again, out of Emily Taylor's lab up in San Luis Obispo, out of Cal Poly. And it shows fog coming in off the coast and a rattlesnake positioning its coils to create a little trough. And it's kind of time lapse, so all this moisture will collect on the snake, and then it will put its head down in between its coil and it'll drink. They know how to get water if it's available. So we have pictures of, even in places where humans live, people have sent me photographs of western diamondbacks and Mojaves that are in people's yards, basically with their mouth sucking on a sprinkler, you know, a broken little sprinkler bib that may be, you know, trickling water out. They figure things out quite quickly, especially around human habitation. So let's talk quick about if you're bitten. What do you do? Let's start with that. All right. Idea if it's possible. So here's the thing. If you're bitten by a rattlesnake in California, who cares what species it is? Treatment's going to be the same. You want to get to the, you know, the one thing you don't want to do, don't try and capture it because someone's got an idea. No, no one cares what it is. You were bitten by a rattlesnake. Treatment's going to be basically identical. You are going to get a product called Crofab. And depending on, now they do it by observation. So depending on the swelling and as it advances, if you're bitten in the hand and you get it to the emergency room, they're going to make a ring right where the swelling is. Put the time down. And they're going to watch that advancement. They're going to give you antivenom accordingly. The average antivenom treatment, so I said Southern Pacific is our most common rattlesnake you're going to run into, the Santa Monica Mountains in San Gabriel, San Bernardinos. That is an average of 30 vials of antivenom right now. So the average cost is going to be about $500,000 for the average hospital stay for a severe rattlesnake bite. So you don't want to do that. Remain calm, call 911. I know it's difficult to remain calm, especially if it's a large snake and you feel pain. You know, just immobilized, you know, does it really matter? You know, all these things like, oh, put it above your heart or below your heart or this and that. Venom is traveling through your lymphatic system. It is not going through your veins unless the rattlesnake actually put its, you know, hit a vein directly and put venom into you by that route, which means you're going to die faster. So hopefully you get the standard bite, you know, in a fleshy area where it's in your sub-Q space, and most of that venom is immediately going to be taken up by the lymphatic system and move through your body. So we're just not going to worry about all this. You know, you're going to immobilize the limb. You know, does it really matter? Probably not. Time matters. Okay, that's all you need to know. Note the time the bite occurred. Remove tight clothing and jewelry. So, I am happily married and have never worn a ring for the one simple reason is when I had my ring on and I was bitten in this hand, I almost lost my finger because they couldn't get the ring off. They cut it off. So, don't wear jewelry. Right. Get to the hospital as quickly as possible, you know. That's what you need to do. All right, antivenom is currently the only treatment, right? There is nothing else. You do not want to have anybody put any other weird stuff on you or in you during this time. Do not panic. All right, do not try to capture the snake. We already went over that. Do not use a tourniquet. Now remember I said this is now moving the majority of it through your lymphatic system. You can put a tourniquet on there. Here's what you're doing by putting a tourniquet on a limb. You're basically isolating that venom. And remember, venom is this complex mixture of proteins and enzymes. So now I have a high concentration of an enzyme breaking down my muscles. No tourniquets, okay? You're more likely to end up with an amputation with a tourniquet. Do not do the old, cut open the wound and suck out the blood thing, do not do that. Doesn't do any good. It's already in your system. You're not getting anything in the extracellular space or the lymphatic system. Again, there's no physical possible way. The problem is, since most bites are on the top of the hands or the top of the feet, because you're walking around or you're climbing and putting your hands where you're not looking, we have lots of blood vessels and lots of ligaments and lots of tendons, and you're more apt to do damage to yourself than doing any good by cutting open anything. Already went over that. All right, do not apply heat. Do not stick your hand in the cooler with the ice. And especially do not stick your hand in the cooler grabbing for a beer, because you shouldn't have alcohol in your system. Do not do this temperature change. So a lot of people believe, and again, if you get stung by jellyfish, you urinate on you, or you put your limb into hot or warm water, which breaks down the toxin. This toxin doesn't work that way, so don't do any of those crazy things. Do not drink caffeine or alcohol or anything that is going to increase your respiration rate or your heart rate, because now you're pumping that stuff through your body faster. Try to remain calm. And again, it's very, very hard to do. The other thing I'll mention up here, I said do not apply electricity. So, back in the late 1980s, in the medical journal Lancet, they published a paper from a missionary in Peru who said he took a 12-volt car battery and his little clips, and he would shock people who received snake bite. 100% successful. We looked into this more. This guy, number one, did not know how to identify a boa constrictor from a Bothrops. So, most of the bites were non-venomous to begin with. The whole thing was just ludicrous. It doesn't work. You're not somehow changing the biochemical configuration of venom by electrocuting yourself. Don't do it, okay? You just have other problems going on. So, cell phone in a car keys, and we'll talk about being out in the backcountry in a little bit. But when you're out hiking, make sure you have cell phone coverage, because you may not want to walk back to your car if you've hiked in a few miles. You would prefer to have them come to you and take you out. Okay. So, which brings us to the cell phone thing again. So this is Westlake Village, right along the LA County, Ventura County line. You can see this little tiny spot down there, that blue arrow, that little tiny spot with no cell phone coverage. Hey, that's where I keep 500 venomous snakes. So, I have a landline. And this was for the FCC coverage. There's a close-up of my property. There's the house where they're at. So yeah, we get no cell phone coverage. We have a landline. So yeah, make sure when you go out, you have cell phone coverage. All right. So 7,000 to 8,000 people are bitten on average a year, and usually under 10 people, usually around 8 is the average, die from bites. So we'll talk about how bees differ in a bit, but if you're going out anywhere, any great distance, backcountry, have a satellite phone. There's no reason not to have a satellite phone. Satellite phones are relatively cheap now. The other thing is you can rent them for whatever period of time you need them. Make sure you have one, not just for snake bite, for any emergency. If you're going out somewhere where it's going to take you more than an hour or two to get out of your site, you want a satellite phone. All right? And I believe
Yes,
you have them to check out. You
Yeah,
can actually
everybody
check
can
them
check
out.
them out for free from me, your friendly field safety specialist.
There you go. So, yeah, I keep on average a dozen vials for each species. Because even if a dozen is not enough, it's going to buy you some time. Because Dade County in Florida is kind of the anti-venom clearinghouse for the United States. If you have an emergency, let's say on UCLA, some kid had a cobra in his dorm room and got bit. They're going to call up LA Zoo first, and they're going to go like, oh, we don't keep Southeast Asian species of cobras. Call the San Diego Zoo. San Diego Zoo doesn't have it. Then they'll call Dade County, and whatever zoo, because every zoo in the country that displays venomous snakes has a supply of antivenom. And they transport it quickly, depending on, what it is and where you're at. Which is also why snake bites are very expensive. If you need to, if you have hours to get something from the East Coast to the West Coast, you're going to pay for it. Yes?
So obviously the best preventative measure is to just not get bit. But do things like snake eaters actually work at
Why,
all?
yes. You'll find out later. Anything else before we go to plants?
So you said that wasps and bees, you had that little black thingy as an immediate. What about, you said don't cool down snake bites, but you can cool down wasp stings to reduce the helminths, or is that not? I've done it, like I've been stung by wasps
Yes.
in a cold stream, and it was way better than not doing that. So the swelling does definitely go down.
Yes, and I'm not going to say whether that's proper first aid or not, because I'm not 100%
Okay.
sure. But now I have to go home and do my homework.
Okay, because I mean, it's worked for a week to put it in a
Right.
And then
No, because I remember even as a child, someone would get a bee sting and your mom would put like an ice cube on it or something, and it seemed to help. But I'm not saying that's the right or the wrong thing to do, I just don't know right now.
Well,
Okay.
it sounds like you're not allergic to
Yeah, no,
it. Number
Yeah,
one.
you didn't go into anaphylactic shock, so that's a good
Yeah.
thing.
and also
But-
you might want to add some ants there that are sting you worse than ants. There's some ants up here in the hills that can give you
Oh,
sting
yeah.
cancers, so you might want to add that.
That is
And
true.
Alpha.
Okay, I will add ants.
Well, only the Kobe myrmidons, not all of them.
Okay.
So it sounds like the risk with bees and wasps is someone being allergic to them. There's not deadly bees out there that I don't know about.
There are not deadly bees out there that you do not know about. With that said, for years we've heard about these, hybrid Brazilian, Africanized bees that are worked their way up into the U.S. Are they a problem? I'm not going to say yes or no because I don't know. I don't think when you look at that graph of deaths over a year, it seems pretty consistent. So, yeah, it's one of those situations. The other thing going back, you're talking about, it's their volume. Within the last 2 weeks, some woman covered her child to be protected, and she got stung over 100 times. If you get stung 100 times or hundreds of times versus a bee sting, it's a big difference. So volume matters. How many stings you receive is going to determine outcome. So.
Do they anti-venom, do they have expiration date?
Yes. why I'm constantly buying it.
How long do they last?
Depends on the manufacturer and the species. On average, it's good for about 3 to 5 years under refrigeration. So that's why they're saying antivenom is really a problem in third world countries, because they don't have refrigeration. So, and also the manufacturers for the species that occur in third world countries, basically they're not producing it anymore. Pasteur Institute in France used to do a lot of the Middle Eastern and North African stuff. They don't do it anymore. They just don't. You know, there's no economically it's not viable for them to do. So, although the Saudi Arabian government has picked up and they've started their own antivenom institute. So I mean, one will drop off. Hopefully, another one will show up. So there's our state flower. This should really be our state flower because, you know, the Department of Transportation has decided to plant this garbage everywhere, along with eucalyptus trees. So yeah, all this garbage. So I bring up basically the oleander. Here's a classic example of people who were very hungry, they were vegan, they go like, oh yeah, I know plants, dying from their oleander salad. So make sure you know what oleander looks like, do not eat it. If you're ever involved in any horse or llama backpacking, make sure you know what oleander looks like, because basically cattle and horses love to eat this stuff and it is highly toxic.
But not to the horses.
To the horses, you kill a horse or a cow.
But they love it.
But they love it anyways. There's something about the taste of it. They go for it. Then we have this, cholla. So the classic book, The Native Cactus of California, should basically be called, you know, the native cholla of California. So it's most of our native cactuses are cholla species. Cholla, if you've anybody ever experienced cholla besides me and you, yeah, it's horrible. So I brought a real long pair of forceps, which are really good to get under the spines and kind of prying them off. There's no graceful way to get them out. If you're bringing dogs with you or any other pets and they're not familiar with cholla, especially it's all over the ground with the pads of their feet, you can really do a lot of damage to your animals walking on that stuff, and it's very expensive to treat, so you don't want to mess with it. Cholla is, you see that plant, walk the other way. It's not worth, even if your prized rattlesnake is sitting underneath it, you know, you better decide how bad you want that specimen. And these are gators. Gators are good to walk through cholla country, because then they're not going into you, they're going into another piece of clothing. So let's talk about poison oak. We have poison oak everywhere. All right, and always, if you're going out in the middle of nowhere for any extended period, carry the soap. Wash your hands if you're in contact with it around creek beds or whatever, because it changes color over season and whether it's in drought or not. And you may not realize you've touched it, so be very careful with it. Bring some.
Sometimes it doesn't have leaves on it anymore.
That's right. The stems and the vines, and there are several. It can grow as a vine. It can grow as a bush. It can grow as a small tree. I mean, it takes all these different forms, and the only thing you're sure about is those leaves of 3. Okay. Simple green is good. Just you know, follow the dilution on it. Put it in a spray bottle. Spray down on your equipment. Spray down your shoes. It breaks that oil down really well.
Is there some other brands, I know I do trail maintenance, so I have someone who's definitely allergic to it and,
Yeah.
swears by there's
Techno,
tech,
techno,
techno, that's it. Techno.
yeah.
Yeah, that's expensive. I'm a cheap bastard.
Is it
No,
the same as
Simple Green works great.
Yeah, okay. But also, an interesting note, in the Haswalker refresher, they commented that people that are not allergic to this, it's a failure of their immune system to respond to it. And it's about 20% of the people are not allergic.
That is correct, because I was one of those people. Growing up, I ran through the stuff. I rolled in the stuff just to irritate my playmates, my parents, and my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
You know what? Naturally, your immune system changes over time. When I got old, and I mean by old, older than I am now, in my 40s, I didn't purposely try to walk through it, but I did walk through some, and from head to toe,
Yeah.
just looked like someone flogged me.
That's the point I was gonna make. My immune system improved, because I used to also be immune to it.
Yeah,
And I would be the guy in training maintenance to go in and clear out a whole bunch. And after I got hit by poodle dog bush, now, it took me, it was like
Yeah.
3 years before I realized when I get this rash, I finally looked up what the rash looks like, I'm like, that's actually poison
that's
oak.
me.
Yeah, so.
no,
about
and that's
4 years
it. Your immune system changes over time. So to think that you may think you're immune now,
But I'm not
maybe
anymore.
not next year, maybe not in 5 years. So yeah, you should always treat it with respect. Yes.
Also, like, is stinging metal the same issue?
What's that?
Stinging nettle.
Stinging metal?
Yeah, they're not fun. Now, the toxin in that plant, I don't know much about, and I really don't know what the treatment is. So I guess along with ants, I'd better add that to my presentation.
Cold
Well,
stream.
It's also, stinging nettle is instantaneous. You'll feel it
Yeah,
when
oh,
it
yeah.
stings you, whereas this is a delayed reaction because it's an immune response. So it can be days before you even realize that you've encountered it.
Yeah.
Hence the always wash immediately.
And is
Yeah.
the dipping in
Because
water?
the longer the oil is on your skin, the stronger your immune response. So as long as you remove the oil as quickly as you can, then you won't have the reaction.
And then stinging nettle tends to be more temporary.
But stinging nettle you can rub with the back of the sword fern. That was the Native American.
We called it jewelweed in Ohio. is what we-
Yeah, the spores are the natural antidote. It's pretty cool.
All right.
Lots of them, sorry.
All right, so anyways, there's our leaves of 3, and I'm got to get moving here because I'm about ready to get the hook, it looks like, from the back. So let's talk about site preparation quick. So we're in California, we have deserts, we have mountains, we have seashores, we have everything. Down here in the lower left, that is a Southern Pacific rattlesnake crossing a trail at UC San Diego, right on the coast. They occur right down to the ocean, all right? Checklist, type and type of activity, you know. So herpetology class versus you know, a literature department retreat. I mean, you're gonna be prepared differently, you know, you're not gonna have to do the same things. We're talking about, you know, is it a weekend or is it, you know, hardcore? You're out, you know, in the bush for, you know, 8 to 12 weeks. These are all considerations. Location, time of year. I mean, if we're in, you know, December, January, we're not gonna be so hung up on rattlesnakes. Although I'll say one thing about rattlesnake activity, I get rattlesnakes every month of the year now in Southern California. People call me up, like, I got a rattlesnake in my backyard. And so they're out and about. If we have 3 days in a row that are above 80 degrees, I guarantee I'm gonna get a call. So time of year, we're gonna determine on what you're gonna look at. You know, same with the plants, if there's a drought and fire, whatever. Winter or summer, northern or southern California. So you're gonna see a lot of different preparations depending on that location. So we have these magic little computers in our pockets, and we can get the 10-day forecast. Look before you go out. Expect what weather you're gonna get. You know, what daytime highs, nighttime lows are expected to be, because that's gonna determine a lot of activity. The other thing that's just a safe estimate, if there are flying insects out, it is warm enough for reptile activity. Fire dangers, you need fire permits, be aware of where you're going and what restrictions are. The closest hospital, you know, how long is it gonna take me to get someone there? Make sure you have all your emergency numbers for the, you know, park service employees or, you know, whoever's close by. Available transportation, make sure you know what you're bringing in and what's available locally. Landline, satellite phones, you know, whatever, phone coverage. You can check on phone coverage almost anywhere for wherever you're going. It's gotten way better in the state of California than it was even 5 years ago. It used to be if you're going to Vegas, you would have this little strip along the 15, and once you got out into the desert, there's nothing. So make sure you have coverage wherever you're going. And then PPE, first aid, supplies, whatever you need. So patrol. So when you get to the site, you're going to be looking, should you patrol? And I would say yes. You are going to basically, you know, depending on the time of year, you're going to see what's out there. But you're going to look for like mammal activity, insect activity. Is there poison oak? Are there stinging nettles? Are there, you know, ants from hell that are ready to get you? But when you find these things, you know, you may want to just carry along some flags or something to mark areas and tell people, like, be careful when you're over there. There's, you know, a lot of poison ivy or I mean poison oak, whatever. This guy, Spermophilus BGI, is our little California ground squirrel. Something else is bubonic plague. So, not a real common thing to worry about, but if you're in an area where there's a lot of these guys, you should worry about fleas. So even if you do patrol an area, mark off the potential dangers so people camping in the area are not going to be affected. Generally, it's the participants that are going to find the snake. You're not going to find it. So yeah, just make sure, when, again, contain your food, don't leave it out. You know, food is an open invitation to anything around you to feed on it. So, yeah, just be prepared to see whatever. So again, bring gloves, bring masks, bring whatever you need for the situation. This is probably the best one, is when you go out in the field, make everybody wear pants, long pants. This is a study out of Loma Linda recently from Bill Hayes. Basically showed that snakes aren't delivering as much venom when they're brushed up against by denim than when it's skin. Very, very interesting data. We don't want pants like that. So make sure they're proper jeans. Also, again, it depends on if you want to carry buckets and tongs, and you know, the UV light I would bring along, again, just to peruse the area at night. Make sure there's nothing crawling around. Snake garters, these gloves are worthless. Do not get anything that is supposedly bite-proof. There is nothing bite-proof. Pair of tongs is not a bad idea if you have to move anything around, because it's when you don't have it available is when you're going to need it. So, and then flags and markers, like I said, you can just bring some tape or flags, and just kind of, if you're in an area and you have a lot of activity or a lot of people, just, you know, kind of mark it off and just kind of have an introductory talk with your people, and just say, you know, you see these red flags, that means you don't want to be there, and, you know, explain why. Okay, so let's talk a few minutes about what we're gonna do next. So anyone who's interested in handling a snake, we are going to pull out some larger Southern Pacifics. Look at the other species that are against the back wall. What I want you to learn is one thing. These things are not evil. They are not going to run after you or try to attack you. But you need to learn how to use tongs. If you're going to carry tongs in the field, you better learn how to use them properly. And basically, for any heavy-bodied pit viper, you are going to gently grab them in the middle. Do not grab their head, do not grab their tail. Because recently, a person I know grabbed one by the tail, picked it up, and the thing swung back, got them in the hand. If it was grabbed properly in the center, that probably would not have happened because it would not have the range of strike. So make sure you're always doing in the middle, and you're not going to just clamp down on these things and hurt them. The gentler you are to remove them, the more likely they are going to sit there and take it. They're not, you know, if you start getting rough, if you start really clamping down and applying pressure, they're going to fight you, because now you all of a sudden you become the mouth or the talons of some predator clamping down on them, and they're going to respond in kind. And that's it for the talk.